After my parents sent me to live with my uncle, I never saw them again. He helped me do well. You finally told my real father that he wasn't a good father. I now have a house and a business. At the time, my dad was a successful businessman. But when his company started having serious money problems when I was a teenager, my family lost a great deal. At one point, his business partner stole some of the company's money, which meant my dad could no longer run the business. He had no choice but to shut down the whole business. My dad had always been a proud man who loved his business, but he was very sad when he suddenly lost his only source of income. Our family had always looked to him as a rock, and we all admired how hard he worked, how dedicated he was, and how polite and kind he was in everything he did. His company was more than just a way for him to make money. It was the result of years of hard work and his hopes and dreams coming true. When it broke, it felt like more than just money was lost. It was like a part of him was gone. Our family lost more than just money or the business. It was the uncertainty that came after. My father went from being the happy, positive person I had always known to being angry and short-tempered all the time. It was one of the worst things I have ever been through. Because of how much he had lost, it seemed like he had lost the very features that had made him unique. I remember very well the sad times when he would stay in bed all day. Not at all like the lively man he used to be. He would only leave his room to eat, and even that would be a short, almost mindless process before he went back to his bed. It looked like he wasn't interested in anything else but his room. My mom would do everything she could to make him feel better. He would get out of bed slowly, and she would suggest that he go for a walk or start doing something fun to help him relax. She hoped that a distraction might help him get away from the deep sadness he was feeling. But my dad would often yell at her and tell her to leave him alone instead of giving her the sad answer she was looking for. The pain and anger in his voice made it clear that he was having trouble dealing with feelings he didn't know how to handle. During this hard time, my mom was the only one who could support our family. She had always worked hard as a nurse at a nearby hospital, but after my dad's business failed, she had to take on even more weight. The rent was past due, and the bills kept coming in. So that she could help us, she had to work extra shifts at the hospital and often put in long hours. It was hard to watch her go through so much while juggling her work duties and trying to keep our family mentally strong. Even though she never said anything bad, I could tell she was tired because I could see it in her eyes. Being strong made me worry about how long she could keep going, but I also admired how much she was carrying. There was a heavy, unsaid stress in the air at home during that time that could be felt everywhere. Mikey, my younger brother, and I did our best to stay away from things that would make our parents mad, especially our dad, whose moods had become very unstable. Here's the thing, Michael was always smarter than me. He was the kind of kid who was born ready to learn. Being the type of person who likes to spend their free time reading and working hard puzzles made him a bit of a nerd. However, even though I did very well in school, I was interested in more than just learning. I loved basketball, but I was also interested in a few other things, which showed that my grades were not as good as Michael's. I did my best every time, though. My mom always kept an eye on my grades, so she had never had a problem with it until then. She saw how different we were and liked how hard we all worked to reach our goals. But as my dad spent more and more time at home, things in our family started to change. He became suddenly interested in our marks and would say things like, "I clearly wasn't working as hard as Michael," which showed how poorly we were doing in school. I remember him saying things like, "Why study if you're not going to be the best? You should stop going to school." His words hurt because they were mean, and because it was clear that they were a mirror of how much he was hurting and feeling like he had failed since he lost his business. He seemed to be taking out his sadness and feelings of not being good enough on me. Even though I knew deep down that I wasn't to blame for his disappointment, it hurt to see him so sad and feel like I was making him unhappy. I tried to pay more attention to my studies so that I could win my dad over. However, it was never enough. My dad would quickly insult my mom when she told me how proud she was of my grades, saying that there was nothing to be proud of since they could have been much better. At first, my mom would try to defend me by telling him that I was doing my best, and that every success, no matter how small, should be recognized. As time went on, though, something changed, and my dad's taunts became more frequent and harsh. She started to copy his comparisons between Michael and me and joined in slowly. They both began telling me every day that my younger brother was doing much better than I was, and that I needed to get better to keep up with him. My dad would tell me almost every day that I was never as good as Michael. The similarities started to affect every part of my life and didn't stop. In the end, they told me I couldn't play any sports after school, not even hoops. They told me to put all of my attention on my studies if I wanted to do better in school. Because of that, I had to give up my favorite sport. That one thing that made me happy and free to study hard so I could be as smart as my brother. But as my parents' restrictions grew, I began to feel trapped in my own home. Their next criticism or comparison always put me on edge. Being depressed started happening to me because I thought my efforts would never be enough. It wasn't possible to rest or relax. It seemed like they were always learning, worrying, and trying to stay out of trouble. I had already done all of my homework, but my dad would always check in with me to make sure I was still learning. He would make me feel bad if I even took a short break. It was hard to focus on anything, let alone enjoy the things I used to love, because the stress was so great. Because I was so scared around them, I learned to spot my parents by the sound of their footsteps. When my dad came into my room, I would quickly cover my comic book with a textbook to act like I was studying, even though I had nothing left to study. If I was caught wasting time, I was afraid that he would call me lazy or not putting in enough effort in school. I was always afraid of letting them down and being compared badly to Michael. This fear and dread filled every part of my life. Because I didn't know what I would be accused of or when the next criticism would come, I felt like I had to be careful. I lost interest in everything, even the things I used to enjoy, because they were just another source of stress for me. I no longer liked playing hoops or learning new things. I felt bad about myself and guilty. I slowly turned into a shell of the person I used to be, always seeking a more distant approval. Even though I was doing everything they told me to do, like learning more, giving up my hobbies, and trying to be the best student I could be, I never felt like it was enough. That made me feel farther away from them, and from myself the more I tried to meet their needs. A year after my dad's business failed, things were still getting worse for our family. While the bills kept coming in and my dad couldn't find a new job, my mom was working herself to the bone to keep everything together. That's when I realized my grandma had come to see me. She must have noticed right away how different our lives were. We used to live in style, with everything we needed and more, but these days it looked like we were just barely making it day to day. I think my grandmother had a serious talk with my dad about our situation, but I wasn't aware of it at the time. She must have known that it was making all of us feel bad. My grandparents came to visit the same day that my parents sat me down for a talk. We talked about my mom, who was working nonstop, and my dad, who was still having trouble with losing his business and his sense of self-worth. I knew right away that something was off because of how serious they looked, which made my stomach turn. They told me that they had come to a difficult decision after talking about it. It was too hard for them to take care of my brother and me. I was shocked because I didn't understand what they said. I asked them what they meant, my heart beating fast in my chest. My dad's eyes looked so sad, and he told me that my grandmother had given them an idea that they didn't want to think about, but they felt they had to. My uncle wants to have kids, but he doesn't have any of his own yet. She talked about that. That would make things easier for my parents and give one of us a better chance at being stable. He and his wife would be happy to take care of one of us. I looked confused when I heard this. Then my mom spoke up, and her voice was shaking. She told me that they thought it would be best for Michael to stay with them so that his education wouldn't be interrupted. Since he was the youngest and most focused on school, they thought it would be best for him to stay. They told me they wanted me to move in with my uncle so they could take care of Michael and I could start over. When I heard this, I felt like the ground had been lifted from under me. I was shocked and hurt. I felt like I was turned down because they picked Michael over me and thought he deserved their care and attention more because he was smarter than I was. I didn't understand why they would send me away or why they thought this kind of family separation was okay. Even though a lot had happened, I had always given it my all, but now it didn't seem to matter. My dad shook his head and told me that they couldn't afford to have 2 kids. He also told me that I would be a better fit for my uncle's family. I began to cry and asked them if they loved me less. I also asked them how I could work harder to get better grades. As the oldest, my mom tried to tell me that Michael had a better chance of becoming great, so I should be okay with giving up this chance without complaining. I remember seeing them, trying to understand what they were saying. At that time, I felt many things, such as betrayal, hopelessness, anger, and a deep sense of loss. Even though I knew things were hard, I never thought my parents would decide to send me away. I had no idea how to deal with it. I felt like the last bit of security I had was being taken away. It was clear that this choice was hard for my parents too, but that didn't make it any less painful. When my uncle finally came to get me, I had to pack up my things and move in with him. When he got there, the truth of the situation finally hit, and the weight of what was going on almost became too much to bear. I remember crying a lot when it was time to say goodbye to my brother. It hurt to think that we wouldn't be able to share the same space at home, even though I knew I would still see him at school. Michael was also unable to calm down. He couldn't understand what our parents were doing, why they were putting us apart after we had already been through so much together. I prayed over and over that this was all just a bad dream and that when I woke up everything would be fine. However, there was no waking from it, which was sad. My parents hugged me goodbye, and even though I could feel how sorry and upset they were, it didn't make the hurt go away. I knew they were having a hard time and that they thought they were doing the right thing by everyone. Even though I knew that, it wasn't easier to say goodbye. When I got to my uncle's house, I felt both like I knew it and like I didn't. Over the years, I had spent a lot of time with my uncle and his wife. They were always friendly and welcoming, so I felt at ease with them. This time, though, things were different. This wasn't just a visit, it was going to be my new home. It made me wonder how long I would be living here, away from my brother's parents and the way I used to live. My uncle and his wife made me feel very welcome. They were kind and worked hard to make sure the move went smoothly. The first few nights were the worst. As I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, I would feel overwhelmed by how strange myself and my surroundings were. I missed my old room, the sounds of my brother's activities next door, and even the creaks of the floorboards that I had gotten used to. I still missed my parents, even after everything that had happened. Even though the pain was still fresh, I privately longed for the comfort and familiarity of my family. Every month, I tried to change with the times and make the best of things. My uncle and his wife were very kind and helpful, and they went out of their way to make me feel welcome. In the beginning, it wasn't easy. I missed the comforts of my old life and longed for home. But in the end, I saw why living with my uncle was a good idea. One big difference was that, unlike my dad, my uncle didn't get mad at me over little things. Because he was understanding and forgiving, I felt calmer and less tense. Even though she was strict about making sure I did my homework every day, my aunt always told me to find a good balance. She used to let me play basketball or hang out with my friends after school before everything changed. It felt great to be able to do the things I liked without feeling pushed or bad. Also, my uncle and aunt pushed me to try new things and join more school clubs. Not only did they see how smart I was as a student, but also how interesting and passionate I was outside of school. The help they gave made a big difference. As I became more confident and motivated, my grades slowly got better. I liked school more and less, and it stopped being a chore. I was slowly getting back my sense of purpose and excitement about the future. This was in contrast to the fear and stress that had been consuming me before. I would see my brother Michael every day at school, and we would always spend time together. He would let me know how our parents were doing and what was going on at home every day. There were times when I felt jealous, especially when he talked about the little things they did together. I felt more at home with my aunt and uncle, though. It seemed like the right place for me to live, and their house was becoming my home. I can now see that moving in with my uncle was one of the best choices I could have made. I rediscovered my love of life and learning at that moment, and I had the chance to become the person I wanted to be instead of the person I thought I should be. That was the end of a chapter in my life. And graduating from high school felt like a big accomplishment because I had worked hard and it paid off. I got a partial grant and was accepted to the college of my dreams. My uncle, who was very proud of me, offered to pay the rest of my college costs, which made me feel a lot better. My aunt is always so nice, and she even planned a little party to honor my achievements. It was a small and private get, together with close family and friends. My parents were at the party, but they didn't seem very happy about what I had done. Instead of being excited about my college acceptance, they seemed more interested in bringing up the possibility that Michael might get into a better school in a few years. It sounded strange and scary when they said that. I was proud of what I had done and wanted to feel like I had finally made them proud today. However, they seemed more interested in Michael's future than in what I had done, rather than just complimenting me and letting me enjoy the attention for the day. This was more difficult for me because I didn't see it as a race. My heart would be filled with joy if Michael was accepted to a famous college and reached his own goals. He was important to me because I loved him. Unfortunately, my parents couldn't stop comparing me to my younger brother for even one day so they could praise my achievements and hard work without telling me they loved my younger brother more. This made me feel down. My parents only came to see me a few times while I was in college. They could not help but talk about Michael everywhere they went. They would talk about what he had done, what he could do, and how proud they were of him. Things took a strange turn when Michael started college, though. In reality, he had to go to his second choice of college because his first choice turned him down. His second pick wasn't the well-known school my parents were hoping for, but it was still a good school. They were counting on their younger son getting into the famous school so they could brag about how much better he was than their older son. The position my parents were in became tough when Michael's college placement didn't go as planned. It looked like they were upset that they couldn't use his achievements to compare or beat mine anymore. Their well-thought-out story about Michael being the best student was turned on its head. They couldn't brag about him anymore. Along with my sense of justice, I felt a twinge of sadness for Michael. Even though my parents looked up to him, he was still my brother. I knew that he had to have done everything possible to get into the best group. Over the years, my relationship with my parents stayed tense and then ended totally. They stopped calling me, and they stopped calling me too. When I finished from college, I got a good job all over the country. My uncle and aunt pushed me to try, even though I was nervous about accepting. Moving was a risk I'm glad I took because it helped me save a lot of money and make smart investments. Because I have a lot of experience, I was offered a top executive job at a big company. One of my biggest dreams came true 2 years ago when I bought my own house, and the pay raise has been more than enough to support a luxurious lifestyle. My money will go to things that make me happy and for myself, even though I'm not married or have kids yet. I'm still thinking about my uncle and aunt. I send them gifts for their birthday and Christmas every year, and keep in touch with them often to say thanks for everything they've done for me. In addition, I've kept in touch with and helped my younger brother Michael. Last year, Michael told me some bad news. He lost his job at a tech company because the economy was bad and there weren't enough jobs. He and a friend had been trying to start a business since then, but things weren't going as planned. I helped him with money because he was having a hard time and asked if I could invest in his business. Despite the fact that I didn't know much about his business idea, I decided quickly to put money into it. The biggest thing that drove me was wanting to show my support for Michael. I wanted to help him get back on his feet because I knew how hard things were for him. There was no reason for me to care if the business failed as long as I got my boys back. I put my faith in my brother when no one else did, and he is very grateful. Thankfully, his business is starting to do well, though it hasn't taken off yet. There will be a big party for my grandmother's 75th birthday this year because it's her birthday. I was looking forward to it very much. I'm ready to talk to everyone again after a long break. I gladly flew down to celebrate the big event and see my family. I'm not the same person I used to be. My changing speech habits, appearance, and sense of style show that I have worked hard to make my life successful and enjoyable. My parents were shocked by the changes because they hadn't seen me in 10 years and hadn't even tried to stay in touch. It made me feel great when my mom hugged me in a weird way, but also my dad seemed more reserved. He lightly asked what my job was and what I did for a living. As I told him, I could see shock in their eyes. I shocked my dad by telling him that I had bought a house for myself. He laughed and said he couldn't believe it, as if I couldn't do something so huge. This made me angry, so I told him I would never pretend to own a house, and that not everyone who has been married for years is a loser. It caught my dad off guard when you said that. I told him it was really painful growing up when you didn't believe in me, no matter what I did. It never seemed good enough. People often said bad things about me and compared me to Michael. But I'm not that young boy anymore. It's going pretty well for me. Even though I've done a lot, you still don't recognize my successes. That says more about your worries than it does about me. Personally, I think it's your fault that you still find it hard to appreciate what I've done." My dad looked shocked because it was clear he didn't think I would say no. I also told him that Michael had no other choice but to put money into his talented son's business when he had none left. It was time for my dad to wake up and start noticing how much I had changed. I knew that what I said would hurt people because it was sharp. The hurt look on his face told me he was right to defend himself since he had been ignoring me the whole time. Since the party, my mom has been calling me to tell me how awful what I said hurt my dad. Because what I said made him feel bad, she asked me to say sorry to him for being rude. That I didn't have the right to bring up the fact that he was still getting money from his mother, she says. In response, I have not said sorry to him or changed my mind. Ida for being honest with my dad. Just a few more details about update 1. My dad never went back to work after his business failed. He tried a number of different things. He didn't like having a normal 9-to-5 job though. Thus, my mother has been providing for him financially while he stays at home and works as a freelance counselor from time to time. Michael knows that I don't get along well with our parents. He has never helped them be biased or taken part in it. My brother loves me so much that he has always tried to help me when he can. The kids sent me to live with my uncle because Michael wasn't old enough to help out yet. I think the main reason my parents clearly don't like me is that I show them how bad they are. They must have left me when things were tough because they thought that my leaving would fix all of their problems, or at least make their lives better. Even though I did well while living with my uncle, they were still having money problems. It must have felt like a slap in the face to them. It's hard for them to understand that I've been successful because they didn't see it coming. My uncle or aunt never made my parents take me back, because they really liked having me there. They still think of me as their son, even though they never forced themselves on me and let me build our connection on my own. My aunt and uncle have been very caring and protective of me. I think this is because they have seen over the years that my parents like Michael more than me. They were able to give me everything my parents could not. Second news. I agree with many of you that I shouldn't have to tell my dad I'm sorry for being rude to him. I chose to email my parents to tell them how I felt about them over the years and how disappointed I am that they have never shown sorrow. I wrote this email from the bottom of my heart, listing all the times I could remember them failing me as parents. They knew I didn't need them as a child, but I didn't care about them now because they always left me. There's a good chance they knew how badly they hurt me after reading my email because my mom called me crying and saying she understood and sent me to live with my uncle. She admitted that she hated herself because she saw the pain in my eyes every time we saw each other, but she also said that they had no other choice right now. She admitted that this regret was one of the main reasons for her long-term separation. I told her that I didn't care about her reasons anymore because our relationship was over, and I didn't see her or my dad as my parents anymore. This made my mom very angry, and she told me to move on so that we could start over. Since then, my dad hasn't tried to get in touch with me. However, my mom did say that he was upset after reading my email. I can only hope that he feels bad about what he did to me many years ago. In the same way that I have always done, I have chosen to stay away from my parents for now. Update 3. It's been a long time since I last wrote anything here. It feels good to send the text to my parents because it lets me off the hook emotionally. Figuring out that I finally told them what I wanted to say has made me feel so much better today. My relationship with my brother hasn't changed. I will continue to back him, no matter what my parents say. When they need a break, I'm taking my uncle and aunt to one of their favorite spots next month. Their talk about this house has been going on for years, and I can't wait to show it to my aunt.